Hey, welcome back everyone. This is our 9th video in the Intro to Programming section, and this is our final PowerPoint that we're doing, our final video for this Intro to Programming section. After this, we're going to be doing a project, and then we're going to be kicking into the object-oriented portion. So, this one is about file in, file out. So now we're going to be utilizing a new library. For reading and writing to and from files, it requires the library of include Fstream. Within Fstream, there are two types that we're going to be using, and it is ofstream and ifstream. Ofstream is the output. Think of this as the replacement for cout, and we will be calling it fout. And then ifstream is our input. You could think of this as a replacement for the cin, and we will be calling it fin. So cout, console output, fout, file output, cin, console input, fin, file input. So first we're going to talk about our ofstream. To output to a file, we want to use the following. Ofstream is the type, and this comes from the Fstream library. Then we'll give it a name, and again, we're going to title it fout for file output. And we can either overwrite to an already existing file or create one, and that's what this line of code does. So ofstream is the type, and then we're giving it the name of fout. So that is the first line of code that we're utilizing for our file output. And now we're going to refer to everything as fout. That's how we're going to utilize the ofstream feature. So the first thing we want to do is we want to do fout.open. So this fout.open works in two different ways. It will look to see if this file exists, and we have to put it inside quotes. We're going to check to see if this file exists. If it does exist, we're going to overwrite it. And that just means we're going to overwrite line by line. So hypothetically speaking, let's say this file does exist and there's 100 lines in there right now, but then we overwrite and we only write 5 lines. It's only going to change those 5 lines. The remaining 95 lines will be what was previously in there. It's not going to go through and wipe the entire file. But that's just how that works. And then if this file does not exist, then this will go and create it. So here's our first few lines. So we have our ofstream, and then our object of an fout, and then we're doing fout.open. If this file doesn't exist, it will create it .txt. So we're creating a .txt file. This is us actually writing to the file. So similar to our cout statement, we're now just doing an fout statement. Seems pretty easy. Fout, this is the first line in our text file. Endl, so it writes the next line. File out, this is the second line. Endl, file out, this is the third line. And when we're done writing to the file, we must close the file. So fout.close. That is all pretty basic, right? So we're just creating the object, we're opening the file. This will open a already existing file, or if that doesn't exist, it will create the file, and then we write whatever we want to the file, just with the fout statement, and then we do an fout close when we are finished. Next, we're going to be talking about the ifstream. To receive input from the file, we'll be utilizing the following. It is an ifstream as the type, and this comes again from the Fstream library. We will give it a name, and we're going to be calling it fin for file input. And this file must exist in the same location as the CPP to read this file. So this is where things get a little bit different. I can't go and read a file that doesn't exist. That's the first part. The file must exist, and it must be in the same local location as what our CPP is already in. Now, I'll give an example of that when we actually get into the coding portion. I'll show you how I'm confirming that something exists within its same scope or within its same folder. But that is important. I can't go read I can't go and pick up a book right next to me and read it if the book doesn't exist and it's not there. So that's the same concept here. I can't go and read a file if the file is not local. So this is how we're going to utilize it. Again, very similar so far. It is an ifstream instead of ofstream. So ifstream fin, and now we're doing fin.open, already existing file. Again, this file must exist in its exact name, and again, we put it in quotes. So what I'm doing is I'm just going to create an array, so a string array of lines in the file, and unsure about the size of it, so right now let's just make it large and call it 1,000. And then I'm doing the ifstream fin. This is how I create the ifstream object, and then I'm opening an already existing file, and now I'm just creating an integer, a counting variable, and I'm setting it to 0. So this .eof function is called end of file. So fin.end of file. this will return true when we are at the end of the file. So right now, I haven't read my file yet, so it's obvious I'm not at the end of the file. So fn.endOfFile, again, it will return true if we are at the end of the file. In this case, we're not, so this is going to return false by putting the, where's my cursor? There we go. By putting the exclamation point in front of it, I'm negating. So not end of file. That is true. I'm not at the end of the file, in which case, let's go execute all the lines of code within this while loop. So first thing we're doing is a get line. So get line, instead of doing a cin, I'm now doing an fin, and I am storing that into my array in the 0th index. And the next thing I'm doing is I'm incrementing I. So that way the next input isn't going to store itself into the 0th index, it'll store itself into index 1, and then index 2, and index 3, and index 4. And what I'm doing here is I'm grabbing all the lines of code and I'm storing it into a local data structure. So I'm not all lines of code. I'm grabbing all of the lines in my text file and I'm storing it into a local data structure. So I'm essentially going and reading the file from the user and storing it into something, a local data structure. That's the logic of what I'm doing here. So again, this feels a little complex. So we're going to start again from the top. So creating a string array of 1,000 variables. Our ifstream operator, ifin, this creates it. Ifin open, so we're opening our file. Just creating our counter, setting it to 0. While we are not at the end of the file, continue these 2 lines of code. So it's just get the first line, store it in this position, increment to the next position. And then as long as we're not at the end of the file, grab the next line, store it here, grab the next, store it here, grab the next, store it here, so on and so forth. And it'll continue to do this until we are at the end of the file. And then when we are done writing to the file, I'm sorry, reading, we're now reading, so we are done reading from the file. From the file, we must close. And then lastly, if you have questions, please get some help. So let's get into our coding portion. So we want to, we want to create a new file, and this is our fin, fout. So I'm just going to call this fstream finish, and then let's create a CPP, new, and we'll call it fin fout.cpp. So first thing I want to do is let's add comments. Include input output library, and then I also need to include fstream library. After that, we'll go into our int main. Int main is used to begin the program. We'll then create our output stream, and this is going to write to file. And then let's actually write to file, and then let's close the file, and then let's create an array, a string array, and then let's do our same thing we did as before, but now for the input, create input stream. Write to file was our above one. Now we're going to read the file. And then we're going to use while loop to read the file and store in array. And then let's close it, close file, and then let's print out all contents of array, return the value of 0 to the user. So first thing we're going to do is include iostream, include fstream, and using namespace standard. Now we are int main. Now let's copy all this and put it all. So paste, and return 0 to end it. Alright, so let's create the output stream. So the way we want to do that is our of stream, fout is what we're going to call it, and then we're going to do fout.open, and I'm going to open a file, and we're going to call it if this file doesn't exist, we will create it. We will create it .txt. Whew. Okay, now let's just write some things to the file. So write to file. I'm going to save it just to get rid of our STDs. The STD. There we go. Now let's do some fouts. This is the first line within the file. Endl. Fout. This is the second line. And then fout. Larry Bird is way better than LeBron James. That is easy. Endl. Let's do the Marines are the only legitimate branch. And I guess the joke's on me because I can't spell. And then let's close the file. So fout.close. So we're going to notice that like the close, the open file, the close file, these are all functions, and these are functions that are created within the library. We'll also notice that when we do the end of file function, those are all functions that are local to this Fstream. So there are a couple functions that it has. Let's just out of curiosity, fout dot, and it should give us a list of all the functions that it has internal. So just to see a few of them, and most of these I honestly don't know what they do because it has so many functionality, it has so much functionality to it. But these are just some of the functions that it has. So it has a bad, whatever that one is. It has a close, the end of file, fail, fill, flags. It has a bunch of these functions that it has built in. Again, I don't know what most of these do. I just know how to do everything that's local to the things that I do with my FNs. But it has a lot more functionality than what we're using. I just want to show you guys how that works. So now let's create a string array. So string, we can call it whatever we want. We'll call it lines in file. Lines in file. And then but we'll just set it to 10 so it's not insanely big. But I could put whatever number that I wanted to put in there to make it of whatever size. Now let's create our input. So this is going to be the same thing we did above, but we're now doing it for our if stream. So if stream fn, and then fn dot open, and of course this time I have to open a file that's local. So I'm actually, because I just created this file, I'm going to reuse it because I know for sure that it exists in the location that I need it, and I'll show how this works when we build it. And then we're going to use a while loop to read the file, and it's going to store everything inside of the array. So the first thing I need to do is int I equals 0. So I'm just creating a counter variable, and that's going to be utilized so that every time it's inputting a new item into the structure, into our data structure. So now let's do our while we are not at the fn dot end of file, which is our function. While we are not at the end of the file, do the following, and I want to write to it, so we're going to do a get line. Normally we do get line cin, but now we're going to do fin, and then I'm storing it to lines in file, and I want to set it to I. And then I want to do I++. That tells us to go to the next location. So then the next time it comes in and writes in, it's going to write to the index 1, and then index 2, and index 3, and index 4, until we've reached the end of the file. And then we want to close the file. The way we close the file is fn.close. And then let's print out all the items in the array. So we're going to do that with a for loop. For int. I'm going to give it, so I could do int I, but int I has already been created here. So I could, if I wanted to, just do I equals 0, because I technically already exists. So now I'm just utilizing this I that's already been created, and for this instance, I'm just reassigning it to 0. And then I'm starting with my I is less than, and I'm doing 10 because I have 10 items in my array. And then I want to do an I++. Or if I didn't want to use I at all, I could use any variable I want. I could use I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, so on and so forth. So let's print out all the items. So let's print out index I, lines in file of index I is what I want to print, and then let's endl. So I spelled that wrong. Lines in file endl. Okay, this looks good so far. Let's see what happens. All right, so I want to keep this at the bottom, so I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. I'll push this over here. And I also want to, so you're going to see that the file is going to be created here, and then here's this folder. It's also going to create the txt file in here. So we're going to, the first thing it's going to do, this block of code right here is going to first create the file. So it's going to create the if doesn't exist, it will create. It's going to create that txt file, and then it's then going to write these 4 lines of code to it. Next, we're creating an array, and then we are opening the file in which we just wrote to. So now we're going to open that file, and we're going to grab all the contents in it, grab all the contents in the file, and then we're going to store it inside of our array, and then we're just going to end with it printing back to the console. So printing to the console all the items in the file, and by reading the items from the file, it's not deleting it. So I'm not grabbing an item from the file, putting it in my array, and that deletes it. It's just copying it over. So I'm not deleting anything from the file that's being created. I'm just simply reading it. So let's save it. Let's build it. Let's build it, and let's run it. So we just noticed that this file got created over here. So this file right here got created. It should have showed itself up in here. This must not be in real time. But it did create the file over here. So let's open this file, and it has everything that we wrote. This is the first line within the file. This is the second line. Larry Bird is way better than LeBron, and the Marines is the only legitimate branch. Cool. All that works, and so all of that was stored in the file here, and then we created our array here, and then all of this was grabbing the items from the file, which it did. It stored it into our array, and then here we printed our array back to the console. So that's what we're seeing over here. And of course, our for loop goes till 10, so it's displaying things that do not exist within our array. So that's why it prints index 0, index 1, index 2, and index 3. But index 4 through 9, it has nothing left to print, so it's just going through printing I, and then printing the colon, and then it has nothing to print in our lines and array. So I hope this made sense. This is an example of our file in, file out, writing to a file and reading from a file. It's not too hard. It's nothing that is absolutely crazy, but it's just a cool little tool that we can utilize. Again, so if I want to just make one more quick edit, so I'll make an example of us, let's overwrite LeBron James, or Larry Bird is way better than LeBron James, but we all already knew that. Oh, so it kind of came late, but now this did show up. It's saying F5 to read it. So it's now coming in, and of course it updated itself, so it updated here. It also updated here, and then if we were to pull it up into TXT, and of course it updated here. So it overwrote. So just some play around that we did with it. So I hope this all makes sense. If you guys have any questions, please ask. And again, this is our last video that we're doing for our introduction to programming. So next we're going to get into our project. Our project doesn't have any information on the beginning portion, so there's like no PowerPoint to go through that is informative. It's just going to be like a quick layout of, hey, this is what we're doing for the project. This is my logic, and then we're going to go tackle it. The project should be pretty complex. It's going to be covering dates. So the user inputs a date, and it's going to return the date. So I'm sorry, the user inputs the date in numbers, and it's going to return it with words. So if they were to input like 01/01/2000, it's going to return back January 1st, 2000. Sounds easy, but I want to show you guys how it works. Should be a good time. So I hope to see you guys in that video.